Admit it, you sometimes dream that a distant relative would call you and say that he would leave his entire multi-million-dollar fortune to you. I'm sure you have such thoughts. This happens in real life too, and even I was in such a situation. But first I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Robert, and I'm a nephew of a well-known oil magnate in Europe. My Uncle George, who has got such looks that no one would not think he plays the violin, inherited the business from his father and enthusiastically promoted it abroad. Slowly but surely, he managed to turn an ordinary family business into a thriving business empire. Uncle loved luxury, beautiful life, travel, and by his 70s, he had villas, a private jet, and the best cars, dozens of apartments around the world, and millions of dollars in the bank accounts. I was proud that I have such a cool uncle, and I do admit that he gave me a lot of gifts. Life seemed like a fairy tale until, unexpectedly, Uncle George fell seriously ill after another trip, and the treatment, alas, did not help. His body temperature rose and dropped sharply. His heart ached, and his general condition only worsened every day. My uncle contacted the best clinics in Dock, but unfortunately, neither the money nor connections helped in the treatment. It was difficult for me to observe how my uncle was not himself anymore, and the doctors did say that we can only hope for the best. I remember how my mom cried, not wanting to accept my brother's illness. But we were powerless. One early Saturday morning, my uncle's lawyers called us and invited us to the estate. He said that my uncle was gathering all the children and close relatives to make an important statement. When we arrived at the estate, we saw a full courtyard of cars. There was no place to park. Surprised by so many people, my mother and I headed into the house. A table was laid in the living room. People ate and drank, happily chatting about something. It seemed that they had come to a party and not to see a sick person. My mom and I greeted those present, among whom were my uncle's children, who had not talked to him for many years. They lived for their own pleasure, spending money on entertainment, and did not listen to their father, who advised to spend their lives wisely and use any financial opportunity as useful as possible. Unfortunately, the children had different views about this, and after another fight, they simply left the family home. All those present came for their part of the inheritance, and it made even sadder. I have always been very friendly with my uncle. He replaced my father, whom I never had, and I sincerely loved him, not for his gifts and money, but for his attitude towards me. After some time, my uncle came down to us. He could barely move, holding a working stick in his hands. In a couple of weeks, he became very thin and aged 10 years. There was no more enthusiasm in his eyes, and this made me feel so empty inside. He sat down on the sofa, gestured to everyone, and asked to listen. My uncle talked about his life, about business, and that how he would like the family business to continue. His children, Jody and Sam, frowned. They never liked their father's work. They always wondered, why do work? When you've made a whole fortune, you can just sell everything and live for your own pleasure. They did not work for a day and did not want to work. And dealing with their dad's business affairs was not all included in their plans. There was silence in the room, and what happened next just shocked those present. Uncle got up from his chair and loudly announced that all the fortune will be inherited by the one who fulfills his most cherished childhood dream. He gave us 2 days. Having said this, he left the room. All those gathered began to whisper. Someone suggested that Uncle had already lost his sanity. Important question hung in the air. What dream did he have in mind? What could the dream of a person who has millions and who can afford absolutely everything is? Mom and I left the estate. She began to remember what her brother dreamed of when he was little, but she did not remember anything special. We came home and I went up to my room. I took a piece of paper and began to write out Uncle's potential dreams. He loved fishing. Maybe he dreamed of a fishing rod, or he often talked about one children's book that he loved to reread, but lost it. Maybe this was the dream, to own that book again? I wrote and wrote, and did not know which of the options was correct, until one day I turned on the TV and saw a video clip. It dawned on me, this is the very dream of my Uncle George. I ran up to my room and told her. My mom, with tears in her eyes, said that this was really the right answer. The day of meeting came. I was very worried. Uncle came down to us, and this time he looked even more tired and thinner. His eyes were so sad, he understood that his days were ending soon. He sat down in a chair, sighing heavily. With a gesture, he showed that he was ready to listen to us. The first was George's daughter. She bought a gold bar and said that Dad dreamed of gold and that this motivated him to achieve success. My uncle smiled, but said that this was the wrong answer. Then my uncle's brother took the floor. He was holding a small Labrador puppy in his arms and said that their parents forbade keeping animals at home and perhaps a dog is the very thing he cherished. My uncle shook his head. After that, Uncle's son came out to the center of the hall and handed him a brand new camera. He explained his choice by the fact that his dad often spoke about his love for photography, but could not prove himself in this area. My uncle shook his head again. Everyone spoke or showed their potential dream, but no one guessed it right. Uncle George looked extremely sad. He was offended that his close people didn't know him that well. And now, my turn came. I had a huge package in my hands. I walked closer to my uncle and carefully took out the contents of the bag. Seeing what I brought out, everyone gasped. I heard someone laugh softly. But when I saw my uncle's eyes full of tears, I realized that I had guessed. The cherished childhood dream was a violin. I remember when my uncle asked me as a child what I wanted to become. I replied that I wanted to be a pilot, that I wanted to fly and be the emperor of the sky. My uncle replied that I would certainly achieve my dream and never give up on it. He admitted that he dreamed of playing the violin, but his family didn't support him. His dad even laughed in his face. Then the boy secretly went to classes where he learned the basics of playing the violin and could soon play whole compositions. My uncle was about to buy an instrument, but his parents, having learned that he was practicing without their knowledge, strictly forbade him to even come close to the violin and made him do boxing, a more masculine hobby in their opinion. My uncle took the violin with his trembling hands, ran along the strings, and a moment later, a beautiful melody was heard in the room. Everyone froze in silence, not knowing what to say. As soon as my uncle finished playing, everyone clapped and expressed their admiration. My uncle got up from his chair and loudly announced that all his inheritance goes to me, the only person who all these years has not only listened, but also heard him. My uncle hugged me tight and we both burst into tears. A week later, he was gone. I became the head of the family business and continued to do it. More recently, I opened a music school named after my uncle George Stevens, a successful businessman and wonderful violinist. If you liked the video, then please give it a thumbs up and write us some comments. Don't forget to subscribe.
Do you believe in miracles? Has anything happened to you that radically changed your life? My name is Sylvie, and last year has become unbearably difficult for me. I almost had to say goodbye to my life. I'll tell you about everything in the right order now. I live with my parents and older brother Pierre in a small town in the south of France. My parents work on a farm and my brother and I help them. Life on a farm is not actually as boring as you might think. In our free time, my brother and I pick mushrooms, run through the fields, play with pets, and just love to see the beautiful sunsets. Watching the sun go down and the twilight coming onto our lands is just magical. I still remember that day and shudder a bit. After working for a while, Pierre and I, as usual, took our bicycles and headed home. We chatted about random things and drove along the road, thinking about our mom's signature lasagna back home. Pierre showed me how he could write without hands, and I tried to repeat after him. Suddenly, a large car flew out from around the corner and was heading straight for me. I didn't have time to turn, and all I could do was push Pierre to the side. I'm standing in a large store, and a nice girl with a red cap on her head smiled at me and showed me lottery tickets. I chose the last one and I was looking at the tickets, which the saleswoman carefully was erasing with a coin. 1 star, the 2nd star. My heart was beating wildly. I'm waiting for what is hidden under the 3rd ticket. Bingo! 200,000 euros! I won 200,000! I started screaming and jumping from joy. The ideas about where I would spend this money immediately came to my head. Then a man came up to me with a folder in his hand and then held out an envelope, saying that he congratulates me on being accepted to the University of Milan on a full scholarship. I'm standing in complete shock, a lottery ticket in one hand and a letter of acceptance to uni in the other. My attention is now caught by a banner on which it says 2025 in large numbers, and it says that I'm on the list of the best university students. I work for the most successful company in the country, I have a beautiful expensive car and a lot of money. I look around happily realizing that all this is my future and it will be extremely successful. People are clapping around, but for some reason my parents and brother are standing in the distance and they're not happy about my success. Wait, I'm not dreaming about this, am I? Of course, yes, Sylvie, baby! Through the pain, I finally open my eyes, and through the fog, I see the outlines of my mom's face. It hurts so much and my throat is so dry. I can't speak, but I see my mom and dad crying, and they're glad that I finally woke up. They call the doctor and then hug each other. After examining me and measuring my blood pressure, the doctor said that the numbers were all normal and that I might be discharged this week. Not really understanding what had happened to me, I could hardly pronounce the words, and I asked my mom what happened. My mom was crying and said that the car lost control and hit me, making me fall into a coma for a whole month. Pierre, whom I managed to push away, was not injured too bad. He got off with a couple of bad scratches. "Where's Pierre?" My mom said that he came every day and stayed overnight with me in this room. He's very worried and blames himself for what happened, although it was clearly proven that the driver was at fault because he was driving at such high speed. I spent a couple of days more in the hospital. They injected me with vitamins and prescribed me meds and a special diet and told me to look after my health as much as possible. Thanks to my family, I quickly recovered and I was soon able to travel to the town to help my parents sell their products. The weather was clear and I went to the supermarket to buy some water. At the entrance was a table with lottery tickets. I wondered what the big prize would be for the winner. I came closer and froze. The same girl from my dream was standing at the table. She was wearing the same bright red cap, and she said exactly what was in my dream. I stood there, unable to say anything. Suddenly, I realized that I needed to test my luck and to choose one of the last lottery tickets from the stack. In my head, I didn't believe in my luck and I was laughing at myself when suddenly, the girl in a cap screamed loudly that I won. People around me started clapping, but I didn't believe it and just looked at 3 identical pictures that brought me those 200,000 euros. I'm rich! This is a lot of money for my family. We will finally be able to buy ourselves a house and a nice car, and we will travel. I was given a large poster with the amount of money written on it, and within an hour, our entire small town was talking about me. In an instant, I became a celebrity. My parents, learning about the prize, were simply shocked. Pierre jumped for joy and immediately said that he wanted a PlayStation. We started a completely different life. We bought a nice cozy house, a big car, and expanded our farm. Our family was happy. Because of my treatment, I stopped going to school and switched to homeschooling. I began to prepare for my university exams. I dreamed of Italy and prayed that I was lucky this time as well as I was with the lottery. Several months had passed and I lived waiting for the acceptance letter. One early Saturday morning, when the postman knocked on the door and brought me an envelope, I was almost sure that I was accepted. Joyfully running into the kitchen, I showed a letter with congratulations from the university. My parents and Pierre were so happy for me. Doing it all on my own and even getting a scholarship was like pulling out that lucky lottery ticket. We sat down for breakfast and discussed what I would need for school. You know, after my coma, I began to believe in prophetic dreams because what I dreamed began to come true. A month later, I flew to Italy for my studies. Everything was so new to me. I could not stop being amazed at Milan. Every street seemed magical and beautiful. I wanted to dive deep into the world of fashion. I made new friends with whom we went out, visited various places, dined at cute cafes, and lived the life we always wanted. I confess, all the studying I dreamed about was kind of in the background. I was not particularly worried about it. After all, judging by my dream, a successful career and an interesting carefree life awaited me. So why try if everything will be fine anyway? I rarely called my family. Now I had no time because in the evenings I went out and then slept all day the next day. I felt that my parents and brother were mad at me, but I was not very upset about this. The city completely changed me and my life. It was time for my exams, and I confidently went to the university knowing that I would pass all the tests because I would be a top student. And how disappointed I was when I scored the lowest score possible in absolutely all of my classes. Yes, you're right. I failed my exams. And what was I just thinking? After seeing the results, I cried, realizing that with such grades they would take away my scholarship. I would have to go back home and work on the farm. The thought that I was ruining my future with my own hands sobered me up. I made a meeting with the dean and asked him to give me another chance, and that now I would certainly score high and become the best student. The dean agreed, and I had only a week to retake the exams. Day and night I prepared for my exams, not giving myself time for a break. I set a goal that I would certainly hand in all the papers in time. The day of the exams had come. I was terribly worried because my whole future depended on this day. The professor entered the classroom, asked to turn off the phones, and announced the start of the exams. Time has gone. I studied for almost 4 hours, answering questions and trying to write my answers in as much detail as possible. I felt so relieved leaving the classroom after being done. I missed my family so much, the hugs of my parents, the cheerful laughter of my brother. I immediately dialed my home phone number and apologized to them for misbehaving recently. I promised to come back as soon as possible. I was ashamed to say that I was on the edge of being expelled. Arriving home, I looked back at my life and decided to change myself. After checking my grades online, I saw that the exams were successful and that I was not losing my place anymore. What have I understood? That my dream was actually prophetic, and I will certainly achieve both success and fame, but only if I try, learn, and appreciate those people who love and support me no matter what. If you like this story, then give it a thumbs up and write us some comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe.